Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, is playing fast and loose brinkmanship with the U.S. debt ceiling. Knowing that it could cause serious problems for the economy, he seems to not care. Here's a few things that could happen. If the government were to default on its debts, it would have a significant impact on the economy and the average citizen's financial well-being. Here are some of the things that will happen if the House Republicans don't come to their senses soon. The default would trigger an economic recession, leading to a significant increase in unemployment rates, lower GDP, and higher inflation. This would have a direct impact on the average citizen's income, making it more difficult for them to make ends meet. A government default could cause turmoil in financial markets, leading to a significant drop in stock prices and other investments. This would have a significant impact on retirement savings of the American citizen, potentially causing them to lose a significant portion of their wealth. A default would lead to an increase in interest rates, making it more expensive for the average citizen to borrow money. This would impact mortgages, car loans, and other forms of credit, making it harder for the citizenry to purchase homes or invest in businesses. In the event of government default, the government would have less money to spend on programs and services. This could result in cuts to essential services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The average citizen may see a reduction in the quality of those services, making it more challenging to access the services they need. A government default would have severe impact on the average citizen's financial well-being, potentially leading to economic hardship and decreased quality of life. It is essential for the government to work toward avoiding a default and finding solutions to address the government's debt and fiscal challenges. Another thing that could be adversely affected by a default is Social Security and the VA health system. Social Security is funded by payroll taxes, but the program also holds U.S. Treasury bonds as part of its trust fund. If the government defaults on its debt, it would cause the value of those bonds to plummet, potentially jeopardizing the solvency of the Social Security system. The government may have to cut benefits or increase taxes to make up for the lost revenue. The Department of Veterans Affairs operates the largest healthcare system in the United States, serving millions of veterans every year. If the government defaults on its debt, it could result in a decrease in funding for the VA, potentially leading to cuts in healthcare services and benefits for veterans. A default could have far-reaching consequences, not just to Social Security and the VA, but to the entire U.S. economy. The government's ability to manage its finances potentially could cause significant disruption of financial markets, both domestically and internationally. It would have significant and far-reaching effects on the U.S. and world economies in such ways as a default would cause a sharp and sudden sell-off of U.S. treasuries, which are considered the safest investments in the world. This would cause turmoil in the financial markets as investors rush to sell their holdings. This could lead to a decline in the value of the U.S. dollar as well as a rise in interest rates. The default would cause interest rates to rise as investors demand higher yields to compensate for the increased risk. This would make it more expensive for consumers and businesses to borrow money, which could lead to a slowdown in economic growth. A default could force the U.S. government to cut spending in order to reduce its debt burden. This could lead to reduced fundings for important programs like Social Security, Medicare, and education, which would negatively impact the quality of life for many Americans. It would also undermine confidence in the U.S. government's ability to manage its finances, which could lead to a loss of credibility and influence in global financial markets. This could also lead to a reduced willingness of foreign governments and investors to hold U.S. dollars and U.S. debt. The U.S. is the largest economy in the world, and default would trigger global economic contraction, as many other countries would feel the effects of the U.S.'s financial instability. This would lead to a slowdown in global trade and investments, which would have negative consequences for the world economy. Overall, a U.S. default on its sovereign debt would be a significant and potentially catastrophic event for the U.S. and world economies. It's in the best interest of all parties in such a scenario to ensure the U.S. government is able to serve its debt obligation. People have in the past questioned whether the law is constitutional, as the Constitution says that the debt of the U.S. government shall always be paid. Well, the constitutionality of the debt limit law has been subject to some debate. As I said, the debt limit law, which is a statutory limit on the amount of debt the U.S. government can accumulate, was first enacted in 1917 as part of the Second Liberty Bond Act. The current Debt Limit Act is a revision of the Debt Limit Act of 1939, which has been changed over the years to account for inflation and increased government debt. Some legal scholars argue the debt limit law is unconstitutional because it violates the separation of powers by infringing on the executive branch's ability to carry out its constitutional duties. They argue that the power to spend money and borrow funds is explicitly granted to Congress by the Constitution, and the debt limit law impermissibly restricts the president's ability to carry out those functions. Ultimately, the question of whether the debt limit law is constitutional is a matter for the courts to decide. It has been challenged in the past, but all challengers have been citizens, holders of government bonds, who, for whatever reason, the courts have ruled do not have standing to bring the case before the courts. One would have to feel that they're saying that only the president or the executive could bring the matter before the courts for a final resolution as to whether the debt limit is constitutional or not. In the past, the debt limit was always raised as needed without any arguments. It has only been since 2011, during the Obama presidency, that the Republican House has made it difficult for the debt limit to be raised while a Democrat is in the president's office. Democratic Congresses have never had a problem with raising the debt limit while a Republican was in the White House. The situation needs to be rectified as quickly as possible and preferably for the long term. This debt ceiling standoff is going to destroy America and go a long way toward disrupting the entire world. Kevin McCarthy and the MAGA clan don't care. They will shut down the U.S. economy just to score points. In the past, in fact, it's only been since Donald Trump started insulting Barack Obama that it has been a fight for Democratic presidents to get the debt ceiling raised. The big problem with this is his job is to pay the bills. Congress made the bills. Now they don't want to pay them. At least where I come from, we call that bullshit. I've got no idea. They said, we're not going to cut spending on the military. We're not going to cut spending on veterans benefits. But if you look at the bill they put up, none of that's in writing. None of it. Now, if they had specifically put in there will be no cuts to military spending or to veterans benefits, great. But other than saying they're not going to cut the military, they're not going to cut veterans benefits, and they're not going to cut Social Security, well, they're fucking lying. I know no other way to put it. It's a goddamn lie. And they don't care. They really don't care. Whenever there's been a republic, in fact, you go back in time, whenever the debt ceiling had to be raised, Congress didn't argue about it. They raised it because those people knew they made the bills and all the president's job was to write the checks. Now they don't even want to admit that they made the bills. What's that man thinking? That he's going to score points? If the U.S. defaults, he's not going to score points. He's going to destroy the Republican Party. Because in the past, and Biden's got the evidence that Republicans and Democrats, whenever the opposite party was in power in Congress compared to the White House until 2011, there was never a question about raising a debt ceiling. Now, all of a sudden, since they got that racist Donald Trump as part of their entourage, I shouldn't call him racist. He's classist. It's not a racial divide. It's a class divide. Unless you've got $1 million or power, more like $1 billion, or some kind of power to give him what he wants, he doesn't give a shit about you. He could care less if you curled up and died, so long as you didn't do it on one of his properties. The man's a prick, yet everybody wants to say he's the greatest thing since when? Since when? Herbert Hoover did a better job than that asshole. And what can I say? When he was in office, you had both a Democratic Congress and a Republican Congress. And when a debt ceiling needed raised, they did it. No problem. The Democrats knew, hey, we made the bills, we got to pay them. So they raised the debt ceiling. Now, all of a sudden, they don't want to say, yeah, we made the bills, but we ain't going to pay them. We don't want to pay them. We don't care. We want to score political points. These people are idiots. Plain, pure, and simple. And they don't care if they destroy the U.S. economy or the world economy. But I can tell you what, they don't raise the debt limit, they're going to lose the older vote a lot. Because a lot of those people rely on Social Security. And when you take that away from them, well, some of them don't have much savings, if any. What are they going to do? They're going to starve? Going to not pay their utility bills? Please, Kevin, wake the fuck up. If Social Security doesn't get paid, anyone who is a senior drawing Social Security or anyone on disability, you're going to lose them. No matter what they think about Biden's policies, they're not going to vote for the party to put them into destitution. And as far as not cutting veterans benefits, there's nowhere in writing. He's a lying sack of shit. He wants to cut like $122 billion out of discretionary spending. Well, guess what? That includes veterans benefits. That includes veteran health care. And there's no way, short of basically shutting down down Medicaid and Medicare, which, oh, by the way, those seniors still rely on, are you going to cut that much out of the budget and not affect veterans' benefits? So he's a lying sack of shit. Let's call it what he is, a lying sack of shit. I don't care if what you think about Maxine Waters coming out of California, South LA. She at least knows what is right and what's wrong when it comes to discretionary spending, when it comes to paying the bills. Kevin McCarthy, another one out of California, he don't fucking care. He gave away everything to the MAGA clan just so he'd get the speaker's chair. He even made it so that they can take him out of the job and put somebody else in. Well, he screws up and kowtows to these people. You're likely to see a moderate Republican in there who's going to get some Democratic support because he's smart enough to know, I can't remember his name, from Nebraska. He's smart enough to know that one party alone can't make policy. They want it and they want it now. Make good legislation. And nobody gets everything they want. But that's Kevin McCarthy and the MAGA clan, and they don't care about you and I, Joe Sixpack, and an average citizen. They need to raise the debt ceiling. And preferably, they need to raise it by several $1 trillion, not this $1.5. They're still making bills that need to be paid. If Kevin McCarthy and the MAGA clan want to talk about cutting spending, fine. They can negotiate on that. But they're saying, if we don't get this, we're not going to do that. Well, yeah, you're going to cut federal spending. You're going to cut it because the government's going to shut down completely. Not just a shutdown where, some federal workers get laid off and, they get caught up later. You're going to cut it off to everyone. You're not going to pay the military. You're not going to pay the seniors. You're not going to pay the disabled. You're not going to pay the doctors that accept Medicare and Medicaid. And the people that depend on it are the ones who are going to get screwed the most. These people don't give a shit about you and me. They really don't. They just care about scoring points. Well, score all the points you want. Just don't do it by dragging me and everybody else in the country down with you. Thanks for hearing me out. Like, subscribe, comment. Tell me if I'm crazy or not. Thank you.